So anyway, I'm in the confession booth within the roll call room, and I say, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I called off a pursuit."
Man, he's still blacked out, passing 12th Street. I know we're on Bravo, so if we can get some of these. Oh, and he's going to lose it right here. He's crashing 62nd, and it's going to be just shy of 10th Street on the south side of the road.
Okay, get on. Get to the scene, everyone else. Set up a perimeter.
Welcome to the Failure to Stop channel. I'm Drew Breasy. I'm happy to bring you through my thought process, and I want to talk a little bit about what pursuits are, and I want to show you why I feel the way I feel. Before I retired, I was a lieutenant. And in that role as a lieutenant, when you're in patrol, generally you're probably going to be a watch commander or shift commander. What that essentially means is that you're the highest ranking person working that is responsible for the patrol operations at the time. Sometimes on the midnight shift, you're like the sole decision maker for an entire district of police officers or deputy sheriffs. You also bear the responsibility of everything that happens with every single one of those deputy sheriffs. And with that comes the responsibility of having to call off a pursuit when it's a danger to the public or when it's a danger to the deputy sheriffs or police officers that are working. Sometimes cops don't understand that. And they especially don't understand that when the person who is a shift commander is calling it off. And like in my instance, I used to love being in pursuits myself. I get the apprehension and I get the resentment that sometimes it causes, but hear me out. These are some of the considerations that we take into account whether we're going to let a pursuit go or not. What are we pursuing for? First of all, let's define what a pursuit is. Generally, a definition is it's an active attempt by an authorized law enforcement vehicle to apprehend the occupants of another vehicle who knows that they're being followed or attempted to be stopped, and they take some type of evasive action, like they start turning down streets or they accelerate or something like that. If a law enforcement officer attempts to perform a traffic stop and the vehicle in question flees, that's a pursuit. If you continue that, if you continue the behavior of being behind that vehicle, you activate your emergency lights and the vehicle takes off on you and picks up speed, as we'll see in the video here, that's considered a pursuit. Now, it's not considered a pursuit in some agencies, maybe most agencies, if you shut your emergency equipment down and back way off. And there are several reasons for doing that. You're required to call off the pursuit as a supervisor, and the person that's initiating the pursuit is literally supposed to turn around and go in the opposite direction with their emergency equipment off. They're supposed to be able to see taillights in their rearview mirror and no emergency lights, so they no longer have to flee to get away in theory. So obviously this is unpopular. People get into law enforcement to play cops and robbers, and this is a real life version of it, and it's very expensive and it's very dangerous. I completely understand it. There are some considerations that I never thought of when I was a young officer, and it was pointed out to me by a senior administrator that I appreciate and respect very much. Why are we going to pursue a vehicle for a property crime, let's say, a stolen motor vehicle? So you get behind a car and you run the tag and you find out that the car has been reported stolen. You turn on your lights and the vehicle takes off on you. Okay, so let's break this down. There's nothing more fun than this. Your adrenaline goes from 0 to 1,000. First of all, when you see the hit, the computer information come back that the vehicle is stolen, and then it gets even greater when you're picking your spot to pull the person over. You hit those emergency lights, you call it out on the radio, and you just see some separation. You see them take off on you. There is no more, there's no better heart-pounding action. You probably spent 11 hours and 30 minutes of your shift waiting for this moment. And, in 30 seconds, all of a sudden, your heart's beating out of your chest. And it's very Dukes of Hazzard. I hate to take the fun out of this, but if it's a stolen vehicle, what are we going to gain by chasing this thing? One, vehicle pursuits are dangerous to the cops involved. Very dangerous to the cops involved, because what tends to happen is there's a lot of excitement on the radio. There's a lot of excitement of the person that's driving the pursuit vehicle, and the fellow officers that work around them just want to get in so they can get some, quite frankly, and they can drive fast with a purpose, with the intent on catching bad guys. That's what we raise our right hands to do. However, it gets a lot of us hurt. It gets some of us killed. And over what? Over a stolen car? Because that stolen car, if it wraps itself around a pole because the driver that's in front of you doesn't have the same driving skill or ability, we're somewhat liable for that death. Even though the criminal made the choice to steal a car, the criminal made the choice to drive fast and try to get away, it's still on us once we turn those red and blue lights on because we're demanding an action. Now, they're committing a felony by fleeing or eluding. We have to be very careful. So that stolen car is worthless. It's more than likely totaled and somebody died in it. You think the owner wants it back? Even worse, what if one of our officers is attempting to get over to this pursuit to jump in? Everybody's flying at a high rate of speed and they try to blaze through an intersection and an oncoming car doesn't see and they, boom, T-bone one of our patrol vehicles right in the middle of the intersection. It's happened more than once. Now, all of a sudden, we have an injured citizen on our hands and we have an injured officer on our hands. You've got to think about a lot of things, and you have to work your police radio, and you have these lights and sirens going on, like there's a lot of flashing lights and loud sirens going on, especially if you're working at night and you're trying to keep the vehicle in sight and you're trying to remember what cardinal direction you're headed. There's a lot going on, so sometimes it's easy to overdrive your abilities. And when you do that, you may not see in the periphery the church bus pulling out of the church parking lot, all done in good faith in the name of trying to serve justice to somebody who stole a vehicle, but a lot of innocent people are at jeopardy and a lot of innocent people get hurt. Obviously, the church bus is the extreme example, but don't think for 1 second that it hasn't happened. And then lastly, the property damage that comes along with the pursuit. So if a stolen car we're chasing crashes, the owner's not going to want that back. And if one of our cars crash, sometimes these agencies, these law enforcement agencies are self-insured. That's coming out of the taxpayer dollar. That could get pretty expensive over a property crime. Now, when we're talking about violent crimes that have just occurred or forcible felonies, this is a completely different ballgame. A forcible felony, carjacking, aggravated assault, aggravated battery, sexual battery, aircraft piracy, although we probably won't be chasing too many airplanes, arson, placing a destructive device or a bomb, things like that. Or at one point, burglary was considered, and that's how we were pursuing our vehicles, but we stopped doing that. If a forcible felony has occurred and there's no other way to identify the person that committed it, and there's a fear that they're going to commit other violent acts, then you're more than likely going to be able to pursue that vehicle. There are a lot of considerations that a supervisor has to go through when all of a sudden somebody comes up on the radio out of a clear blue sky and says, I'm in pursuit. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of sirens, like I said, but some of the considerations you have to think about are the time of day, the time of night, how much traffic is on the road, what the weather conditions are, what the speeds are of the people that are involved, to include the officers, what intersections are they going through, a main area, do they know who the suspect is, what offense did the suspect commit, is this an active school zone, are they driving against oncoming traffic, are they getting ready to go over a bridge, do they have a mustache? All these things have to be considered by somebody who's going to make a decision of whether that pursuit's going to go on or not. The officer just wants to pursue. I guarantee it. I've been that officer. I understand what they're thinking. The officer supervisor has to take a 10,000-foot view of what's going on and determine, is this worth pursuing? If we have a license plate and we have reasons to believe that the person driving the vehicle is the registered owner, we have now identified that person, and we can conduct an investigation, get a warrant, and go find that person at some other time. I know that's not a popular decision, but when you weigh how many people that could potentially be hurt versus how many people have already been hurt, it's something else that you have to think about. So let's think of some of our tools that we can use. Sometimes when we were working, there was already a helicopter up. This is an ideal situation because the patrol cars can drop way back. They can turn their emergency lights out, and the pilots and the pilot observers can watch what the vehicle is doing and guide the patrol vehicles into it. They don't even need to turn on their emergency lights. Nothing happens, and the driver may or may not know they're being watched by the helicopter.
62nd, just passing 18th.
Cruisers, back off. Parallel it and get in front.
He's high rate.
There was a helicopter up. They were already watching another situation a couple blocks over. They just happened to be patrolling on the way back to the hangar or whatever they were doing, and they see these three males walking down this popular street. They then see the males get into the vehicle with their FLIR, F-L-I-R, which is infrared, and they are watching these males get into an unlocked vehicle using their shirts. So it's starting to build the probable cause that these guys shouldn't be in the vehicle. It was very late at night, early in the morning, and they get into this unlocked car. It's very common here in Florida. Kids do what they call car surfing. They just go into a large subdivision, and they just check for the unlocked doors, and they get guns, they get laptops, and a lot of times they get cars because people leave the fob. Now they have free access to roam in that vehicle, drive around and commit more burglaries. So this is what happened here. They get into the vehicle. They didn't just back out and drive via the driveway. They drove over the grass, which is another thing that the helicopter picked up on. Then the deputies were guided right into where they were. They got right up next to them and right behind them, which was good positioning. They hit their emergency lights, and then the teens that were driving the car, the teen that was driving the car, treated this like a game, unfortunately, of Grand Theft Auto. And I'm not making light of this incident because a kid was killed in this crash, and they took off. As you'll hear in the press conference here, Sheriff Galtieri says that the deputies backed way down on their speed, and the Maserati hit the speed of 123 miles an hour before it flipped and wrapped around the pole, killing the front passenger. So this is a reason why I don't like pursuits. I completely get that these kids took chances, and one of them died as a result. As of now, I think the one kid is recovering in the hospital. The kid in the back seat is fine. The kid in the front seat was killed, and then the driver was critical but recovering. What they'll normally do is just wait for him to heal, and then they'll decide what charges. If we charge them, they're going to be in the hospital on the taxpayer dime. We let them go to the hospital and heal on their own dime. We know who they are. The police can obtain a warrant for their arrest later on and charge them. Here in Florida, the driver was committing a felony while somebody else died. That is called third-degree felony murder. So potentially this kid could be charged with felony murder for the passenger dying in his car. It should be noted there was a .25 caliber pistol recovered from inside the vehicle. The owner of the Maserati said that was not his, and that it definitely was not in the car when he went to sleep that night. Therefore, it's deduced that the firearm was in the possession of the kids that were in there, and it's more than likely a stolen gun. Here's how the sheriff explained it.
Well, there's tons of them out there like that. I mean, these are crime guns, and this is what happens all the time. I mean, they're out there all over the place, and we run into these where people are selling guns on the street. A gun on the street like that, somebody's probably sold it 100 times for $50, $100. They just keep passing it around. Now, it's possible that they could have stolen it out of somebody else's car, but just from the looks of it, the type of gun that it is, again, and because the only history of it was from 1968, is it's probably just been passed around in crime circles for a very long time and being sold very cheaply. I mean, it's a 25 caliber, it's not a 9mm, it's not a 45, it's not a 380, it's a 25, which is a very small caliber gun. But it'll kill you, make no mistake about that. And they use it in a robbery or whatever else they're using it for. But it's a bad situation when you got two 15-year-olds and a 16-year-old that are out with masks, with gloves, with a gun, that are up to no good in the middle of the night. All those are ingredients for bad stuff.
So in summary, definitely not making light of anything here, but speed kills. And none of us are immune from that. No cops are immune from that. No citizens are immune from that. No crooks are immune from that. So once they start hitting speeds of over 100 miles an hour, the likelihood of them making a very slight error and having to overcorrect, as we saw here, the vehicle began to fishtail. They overcorrected and flipped the car and ended up wrapped around a pole. It's tragic. It's still 3 kids, regardless of what they were out doing. The parents were actually very caring parents from what the sheriff was saying. They've never been charged with anything else, these kids. This is more than likely not their first time doing this. They didn't have extensive criminal histories like some might think. And as a matter of fact, they were stopped a few weeks earlier in a neighborhood doing something similar, but nobody was arrested for it because there was no probable cause. They were no strangers to this game. They just hadn't been caught. You know, one life has ended. Another life is potentially going to end because he's going to end up going to prison for quite a while if he's convicted of that felony murder. And that the third one has quite a story to tell. So with that, this is why I'm not a huge fan of pursuits. I think that we're better cops than just having to play cops and robbers all the time. If we know who's driving the car and there's no propensity for further violence, we can catch them another day. We're good enough to do that. What we don't want to do is put the public at risk. We should never let our authority overshadow our service, and we have a duty and obligation to protect the public, which means not engaging in behavior that is dangerous. I know it's an unpopular opinion. I'm not saying clear and definitively that if a deputy sheriff on my watch was about to get into a pursuit that I would call it off. I would say there are a lot of things that I'm going to consider and leaning more towards being conservative when it comes to catching a bad guy by pursuing the vehicle. You've got to take into account the driver's state of mind and the officer's state of mind, and you can hear that in the excitement in their voice. You can hear that in the totality of the call that they were just on, and then you have to take in those other factors. Are they on a curvy road? Are they in a mountain range with, driving next to a lake with no guardrail? All of these things should be considered when deciding whether to let a pursuit occur. That's what I base my decision on. It's not an easy decision to make, and I've had to buy lots of ice cream to make up to some people, but the facts are the facts, and I would rather call off your pursuit and have you hang your head because you're upset with me than I would have to knock on your spouse's door at 4 a.m. and tell them your loved one is no longer with us because they were in a pursuit and they lost control of the vehicle or somebody ran into them. That's the reality. Please smash the like button. Don't forget to follow Failure to Stop if you're not, and let me know in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong. I won't be offended. I'm Drew Breasy. I'm entitled to my opinion.